Bam! MC is in the house. What is going on, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. While I get situated here, give you guys a chance to jump on. Do me a favor and give me a shout that you could see me and hear me. It's going on a bunch of different platforms today. You know, I started doing it on Twitter too, but I have no idea what that looks like. And I'm going to try and look right now. If anybody's on Twitter, what's up, Jamie? Up in Canada. Good to see you, my friend. I want to see what this thing looks like on Twitter. Oh, yeah. What do you know? It's there. All right. So if you guys don't know, I'm on Twitter at MasterChim47. 47's one of my special numbers. So that is the Twitter handle. I believe I had one before that at one point, and I think I got in trouble. Apparently, Elon would have saved me eventually had I kept it, but it was not to be. So I have this awkward-ass Twitter handle. Alan, what's going on? Afternoon, loud and clear. Good to hear it. Jay Crustle in the house. What's going on, my friend? Big Joe, good to see you. Good to see everybody as you guys are jumping on the various different platforms. All right, so a couple of things. Starting off with the most important, because it is business-oriented. And you guys know the more that I'm able to do this, the more that I'm able to make money from it, which in turn allows me to do it more. And that is how the cycle goes. I do a tremendous amount of work offline. I have nothing to do with social media. And it's really like, listen, I'm going to be as productive as I can, but I need to invest my efforts. All that being said, I don't know if that's a hell of a sales pitch. Not really, to be honest. But the point is, I have a oh, great. Here goes the spam. I have a sale going on with the warriorproject.com. So for those of you that don't know, what's up, Corey? What's up, Katie in the house? For those of you that don't know, I have a membership site, and it is the Warrior Project. Now it can be found at the warriorproject.com. It's in the description of the video on whatever platform you're watching it. Now, what is the Warrior Project? Well, I started this a couple years ago, and I needed a hub to sort of create a following and also a place to put my content in a way that I can not only archive it and build on it, but also monetize it and allow me to invest more time in doing it. The Warrior Project is what came of that. Prior to that, I had a membership site or membership, I guess you have to say a site, but at least a function of the podcast that I was doing, the Pressure Project. And so there was the Pressure Project members, and then that grew into the warriorproject.com. So the warriorproject.com is my site. It's where all of my power programs are. Now, I've spoken about power programs before, and I'm not going to go down an itemized list of everything in the sale. Maybe later on in the video I will, but suffice it to say, it's usually $497 a year to be a part of this membership club, and it's usually closed. I usually cap it. I open it a couple times a year. Now is one such time, but not only is it being opened, but it is only $120. So $10 a month it works out to, but $120 gets you a year of membership. With that, you have access to every single power program in video and audio form. You have the entire archive of my podcast, The Pressure Project, a whole bunch of other content that it's found, on the site specifically, along with the Facebook group, the private Facebook group, which has a couple of hundred members right now. Not everybody likes to partake in the membership or the group on Facebook, and I don't blame them. Some people, they just don't want to have social media, or maybe they don't want to have Facebook specifically. But I'm actually going to look the current list of, what do I have here? Okay, so right now on the Warrior Project tribe Facebook page, the private group, there's 150 members. So currently 150. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. So, all right, where am I at? All right, so go to warriorproject.com. I made a fancy banner, and boom, there you go. That's about as techy as I'm getting on it. So today we have a topic that is planned, and it is urban vermin. Urban vermin. So for those of you that were raised in the city, a lot of what I'm going to comment on, a lot of perspectives I'm going to offer, you're going to be able to relate to. Um, Maybe you haven't done the processing of this information. You haven't looked at different universals and applied different sort of filters on what that experience was, but if you're from the city, a lot of this is going to resonate. Now, if you're not from the city, I will tell you, number one, good for you. I would say by and large, when it comes to universal formulas, those individuals that were not raised in urban environments have a leg up on those who were. And I say that, as plainly as anything. It's really not, I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it and say, yeah, but there's also, a good thing about, of course, there's pros and cons of being raised in any environment. But the artificial nature of what occurs in urban environments is something that cannot be undervalued when looking at its effects on the people that are exposed to it, growing up, right? So right now, we're looking across the country, and we're looking, me being in America, we're looking across the country, and we're seeing a lack of morality, a lack of decency, at a level that, I'll be honest, growing up, it's like I thought, only corny, normie type people spoke like this about things. Maybe they were church, people, or they were the people that knocked on your door, whether it's the Mormons or the fucking Seventh-day Adventists, or everybody, Jehovah's Witnesses. Obviously, all these people were knocking on doors, where I grew up. It was usually those type of people that got put in the box of those people talk about those terms of morality and this, and a lot of times, and again, coming from a perspective of somebody that was raised in the city, we started off with this premise that, well, everybody, should be able to do whatever they want, as if there was no cost or consequence, because that consequence was never really included in any of the conversations or the contexts that we were raised with, growing up in the city. Everybody could be whatever they want, and if you want to, if you're a man who wants to wear dress like a woman, and not even just like a woman, but just like a whore woman, and parade yourself around the city, good for you. Everybody should be able to be who they want. And as a child, I now looking back, I could see the allure of it, because anything goes. That's sort of the sentiment. The sentiment is anything goes. And when you have that type of environment, and you allow people who are still able to survive, if not thrive, while maintaining that type of mindset and morality, I would say, the culture that supports it, it's like it kind of makes sense that they would literally think that these are universal principles that they're leveraging, because how can you tell somebody, two gay men who got married and have two children that they adopted, and they wear outfits on the weekends at clubs, but they get a babysitter, and like all of these different things in the modern society that are looked at with a pressure to be normalized, and it may very well be normal at this point, that being a statistical observation, not a moral one. We have to ask ourselves, well, if we're going to be the ones who are criticizing it, what is the context under which that we have criticism to begin with? Because on paper, these people seem to be crushing it. Well, there's a couple of things there, right? So number one, the very way we measure success has been installed in us by these aquariums, by these artificial environments, and the hubs of of the artificiality are urban environments, right? So you have, what is it that we see as being successful? Well, we see it as, I don't think this would be controversial. By and large, most people are like, hey, you got to make money. If you're rich, you're successful. If you have nice things, you're successful. If you're good looking, you're successful. If you're physically attractive, you're successful. And all of these criteria that are set as the metrics of success, we could see a lot of people who check all those boxes that I think if we were to look at, objectively for a second, we could say are miserable. Why are these people who are crushing every metric that our urban environments says are valuable? Why is it that these people could simultaneously be succeeding according to every single way they have to track it, but at the same time be miserable, at the same time be, reliant upon medication, at the same time being disconnected from anything traditional in terms of legacy, family, and the like? And I think, well, you can get away with a lot if you are not subjected to nature's consequences, right? I've made this point before, and I've used this analogy, and a little eccentric analogy on my end, but I'm pretty much known for that. If you were to take a serial killer and you would put him by himself in the woods, and he was given, or maybe he had the ability to survive in the woods, the guy knew his way around a forest. If we were to observe him, satellite imagery, just go with the hypothetical, he would look like a regular person. He would look like somebody who is just doing what people do. There are a lot of natural examples of people being able to function by themselves in nature. And then we start to see, well, what are the limitations of that, right? An individual, serial killer or not, just an individual who is living by himself in the woods. What are the limitations? Well, number one, legacy. He's one and done. If he doesn't have a means to have children, he's got one generation, he's done. So then we add, well, okay, he needs the ability to at least, have children. So you add a female to the mix. And from there, what are the limitations, a man and woman? Well, eventually they'll have children. And if there are threats, if there's some sort of need for work output that exceeds the individual's, ability to do that, well, then that's an argument for more people. So you start to see how, having people collectively together is a good thing for the species. And I would argue that when we get to the urban level of that, the level of there being cities now, modern cities, more specifically, I think if there is a point of diminishing returns, the urban environments of today are certainly on the other side of that point. We are certainly doing more harm than good to the individuals when separating them from all of the things that naturally their bodies, their minds, their ability to connect evolved without the cities. So, I've lived in the city, the most of my life. I'm 47 now. I've lived here in the Pocono Mountains for around 6 years. So over 40 years of living in the city. I know that, you could go, 10 years living next to somebody and not ever having a conversation. There are so many people in urban environments that the needs that an individual has to stay connected, these formulas that an individual needs to connect with other people, is just not a necessity, in a lot of these urban environments. You don't even have to be polite. It's almost impolite to expect a certain level of interaction amongst people in these urban environments because there are just too many people. It gets to the point where you almost feel like you are monopolizing people's time by expecting a certain level of interaction, the type of interaction that's commonplace, the default in more rural, country type environments where there are less people. So, with that, just one observation of the differences, it's like, yeah, you don't want to be by yourself, but the group you have, at what point are there too many people? And I would say when we start sabotaging our ability to connect with people, we look at all of the different consequences that happen as a result of that, right? So, what are some of the things that we observe today in society? Well, in urban environments specifically, um, we see that women think it's okay to have children, without being married. Now, before, you more progressive listeners are, start rolling your eyes that, I'm some traditional, whatever. Like, I'm not, dogmatic in my approach towards anything. I'm very pragmatic, if anything. And I think when you look at what the institution of marriage represents, it represents a codified union that supports the individual's chances of survival, and the lack of fragility that those individuals may have if put in a situation comparatively where they were reliant upon the government, right? So you look at the welfare state and the explosion of that. And this is old wisdom. This is not I don't know about wisdom, but old information, right? I'm not saying anything cutting edge here. Um, when you look at women who want to have children without a husband, you have a society right now that in the short term can absolutely afford to support such a woman. So it's hard to have a discussion about the merits and the long term values or morality even of a lot of these decisions when you have women who are driving, fancy cars, who are paying their bills, who are getting the nails done every week, who have one or two baby daddies. Maybe they used to be married to one. Maybe there are women out there who don't even know the father of their children, because they were out, handing it out like fucking, candy on a Halloween fucking evening. Uh, and we have a society that doesn't necessarily punish them for that. Now, I'm not saying they should be punished in terms of, some legislated, act to be done to these people. But at some point, we have to realize if we're removing the pain of decisions that we would be saying are bad decisions, we are incentivizing that behavior, right? So if you are a woman, 30, 40 years ago, who had a bunch of children, and let's say your husband left you or your husband died, or, a lot of these women were really driven of their own, instincts towards getting other relationships, securing themselves, a man, getting themselves a man, for lack of a better way of putting it. And a lot of that had to do with survival. As you start getting closer and closer to modern day, well, a lot of that survival is taken care of by the government. So embedded in that is going to be a loyalty, to the providers of those resources. And the loyalty isn't a type of loyalty that, we would compare to the loyalty we have for another person. But what the loyalty to these systems are, I would say, is the erosion of the morality that existed prior to it. So if a woman wants to have a baby and expects the government to give her money to provide for her baby, and she creates a system whereby that is how she exists, that is the support system that feeds her child or her children, maybe subsidizes her rent, if not paying it outright completely. There's a certain point where she is now connected, anchored to the loyalty to the system, that we have to understand. If we're going to be critics of that system, we have to understand that there are a lot of people that just can't, separate themselves from the teat of the government. So when we look at cities, right now, I made this observation, some time ago, that when I was growing up in the city, there were good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. There were places you didn't want to go because you'd have a problem. There were other places you were good. And those places were very much community driven. So when I say there were some places I can go, some places I couldn't, that was really a commentary on who I was, who my friends were, where I was raised, what community I was a member of, and those that I was not a member of. So if I would get caught in a neighborhood where nobody knew me, the chance of there being some sort of consequence as a teenager in the Bronx were much significantly higher than me running into that type of issue in my neighborhood, as an example. So even though there was an absolute high potential for violence, for all of the, the negative aspects of what we think cities come with, even though there was that occurrence of rape, murder, robbery, all these other different, things, there was still a relationship that the individual in that place had with how to mitigate that effectively. What winds up happening when you have a society that is incentivized to not rely on neighbors, to not rely on family, to not really cherish or value the connections that we have in a way that not only has us check in with the people that we're connected to, but also have an outlook where we're looking to connect with other people moving forward. The more society disincentivizes that, the more you would expect having children who grow up not thinking they have to respect even their parents. You have children, like I remember, you go back a certain time to my childhood, my adolescence, there were certain codes that we followed, right? You don't curse at older women and men, like I was a badass, I was a badass, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean, I was a derelict, as a teenager. I was a problem. Still had manners when talking to older women, still had manners when talking to most older men. There were some exceptions, but like women in general, it's like I would never curse at a woman or just talk in any vulgar way. And I was somebody who's been arrested. I was somebody who fought a lot. I was somebody that was not disconnected from the harsh realities of what goes on in city life, but there was still this code. All right. You still help the lady that lived down the block with her groceries if you saw her walking back one afternoon. Like, you still had this loyalty to people. And I think that it was a much more functional expectation of what drove that loyalty. It's like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to help this woman. What if my mother was walking down the block and needed help? I would want, and that was still how you thought, even in the 80s and 90s Bronx, right? As an example. Well, now you've now gone down the timeline a lot further. So it's not that anything has significantly changed in terms of the formulas, but now we get to see, okay, what happens when you add 10, 20, 30 years to the trajectory of what a lot of these policies have started creating or started, a long time ago. So now what you'll see kids who don't have those same codes of neighborhoods or morality. You see cultures in these urban environments that are thrust into the ecosystem of a lot of these urban settings, where their loyalty, as expected, is to themselves. And that lack of assimilation also brings along with it a lack of alliance. So you'll have people who are strangers. You'll have people who will not look to assimilate to any, Western type of morality because the pressure to do so just isn't there. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned on one of these live streams that there was a guy outside my school who was on the phone, and he had just taken the last cigarette out of a cigarette box, because some of you people still fucking smoke. It's baffling to me. But this is one such guy. He's probably Bangladeshi. There's a huge Bangladeshi community where my school is in the Bronx. And he's on the phone. This guy is, He looks like an adult. He looks like a job having adult. He looks clean. He looks like he's presentable. Like he's not some degenerate homeless dude or some druggie or anything like that. This is a regular, middle of the day, going to work type of motherfucker. And he's speaking, his language on the cell phone, and he drops this cigarette box on the floor. And I'm there, and it's right in front of my school, and there is literally a city provided garbage can 3 feet from him. Literally, he's standing next to the building on the sidewalk, and the trash can is on the curb of the sidewalk, maybe off a foot. So like we're talking 3-4 feet. And as he throws this on the floor, I go to him and I ask him, like, what are you doing? Like, there's a garbage right there. And he ignores me. Because that's, he's running formulas, by the way, like we all do. He's running formulas that work for him. So throwing the garbage on the floor, that's a formula that works for him. I come and ask him, what the fuck is he throwing a thing on the floor for? He ignores me and keeps talking on the phone. That's a formula that works for him. A lot of these formulas are not congruent with what we would say collectively as an American conscious, what morality is supposed to represent. So this is somebody who is probably a very functional individual in terms of has a job, cleans, he's got a cell phone, he's talking to somebody. Somebody wants to hear what the fuck he has to say. Like he is functional in his day-to-day living, yet he has these incompatible formulas that he's running in terms of morality. So he ignores me. I raise my voice. I don't put my hand on this guy at any point. And I ask him, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why is it that you think that's okay? And I tell him, I said, listen, I own this business right here. Why would you do this? Like, don't you live around here? Like, why would you just there's a garbage pail right there. So it was really my just disgust that motivated this whole thing. Now, mind you, there's too many of them, people doing these types of things for me to go out and, be some vigilante, right? Some littering vigilante, but when faced with just the obvious incompatibility of some cultures, I admit that, yeah, it's frustrating. And when I go to my school, when I drive into the Bronx, I go to my school, I park my car, and I just beeline to my school. I spend time there. I deal with the people that are in there. When I'm done, I get back in my car. I get right back on the highway and leave. And it's not that that there aren't good people there. It's not that there aren't, just great allies to have. The problem was, for me, I just have to pace myself when I'm in these situations because I know I can't solve all of them. And I would say even solving it doesn't occur at a level of a daily interaction and just people. That's what communities used to do. So me making this guy, or I'm going to say I made him. I'm going to say I motivated him to pick it up. and and maybe a couple of other things I motivated him to pick up too while he was at it, just so he realized the value of what a clean sidewalk looked like. But the whole thing is, I can't run that formula day to day. I'm going to wind up arrested. And then that's the not so ironic irony of it is that guys like me who want to improve the quality of these neighborhoods are going to be the ones actually suffering the consequences, because a phrase I've said before, it's like if you're digging yourself a ditch and you're standing in it, there's a certain depth of that ditch where you can't just jump out. You got to climb out. So the process of getting out now becomes a little bit more laborious, a little bit more time consuming. It's a path out of the ditch now. It's not just a jump, right? In the beginning, yeah. And this is when I talk about tribal regulation scales. I mock you so I don't punish you. I punish you so I don't exile you. Like that escalation, this is usually how we dealt with people. We would shame them, we would mock them, and that would get them back online. But with all of those tools of tribal regulation, along with the incentivization of support in the form of resources from a government entity, people don't have the need anymore to get along with their neighbors. And I think that is at the heart of it. The heart of it is not only are they out of practice, not only have they never been exposed to, these formulas of dealing with people in any moral or courteous way, there's an argument now that they don't even need it. So in these urban environments, you do not need to be moral. And functionally, observing it functionally, that is the landscape. So when I tell somebody, a teenager, hey, you shouldn't smoke weed, and he says, why? Or why not? He would say, why, right? Any answer that I give him is going to fall short of any point-by-point argument about consequences. There are some urban environments now where you could assault somebody, get arrested, get let out, and then have prosecutors choose to just not prosecute your case. Sometimes it's a volume thing, but a lot of times it's an ideological thing. So what happens is, if somebody's telling me then in one of these jurisdictions where you could assault somebody and get out the same day without ever paying a consequence, when I tell them they shouldn't do that, that is not a logical, pragmatic, sociopathic even argument or debate that I'm going to win, because they're going to go, why not? And I'm going to go, well, you're not going to be able. But we have story after story of people still succeeding despite contradicting every traditional moral way to be that we try to pressure them to grow toward. So we will lose the debate of what it is to be moral when we attach that morality to the metrics that so many people still choose to use, right? So this gets to the bigger point. There's an argument that you shouldn't be a bad person, because if you're a bad person, the consequence is you're not a good person, right? And we need to get away from creating this or supporting this system that values money and fancy cars and sexualizing yourself on social media for strangers. Like, I remember seeing a former student of mine, right, on social media, and it was one of these, friend list pops up, and he was at Disneyland, Disney World in Florida, with his wife and 2 young children. And this is about a regular dude as I would know. This is a regular dude, a lot of the overlapped, outlook on life and philosophies, and then some politics, like, very much compatible. But this is a guy who would rail on about, welfare and the leeches and the progressive crazy people and all this stuff. Yet here he is still in his 40s at the time, compelled to participate in this corporate ritual of bringing his family to Disneyland, Disney World. And we got to understand, there's a whole life that exists that has nothing to do with any corporate identities. How many rituals does the average American have that has been installed by marketers, by corporate branding, by legislatively supported and incentivized, movements to make people behind the scenes more money? Why is it you want to bring your family to Disney World? Why is it that your child has these back to school pictures that you're putting all over the social media? Why is it that everybody thinks that you're supposed to I don't even know, follow the decorative schedule that stores, want us to do to support whatever sales or incentivized, marketing campaigns that they're running. Like we're being led by the hand, and it gets back to, what is it that's supposed to be important to you? Now, listen, you can live your life. Like I'm living my life, and I'm sure as fuck certain that none of you motherfuckers want to live like I live. There's always going to be some offset, and I have a very customized approach to living. Let's put it that way. But we're not going to Disney World. We're not, looking to do the, the things that are going on in society today, the back to school pictures, fucking perfect. Derek says gender reveals. Holy fuck. By the way, what's up, Jack? Oh, Rockstar put a comment. I got to read that. What's up, Big Josh? Judge Cohen, Johnny Groove, No Name, Mr. E, Willie, what's going on? Good to see you guys. But gender reveals, holy fuck. Derek, I appreciate the share there, because that is something that I don't even know how it slipped my awareness. Gender reveals has to be the most pathetic fucking thing in our culture right now. And here's where it's at, right? I'm going to blame men, but you women aren't going to be happy with how I blame them. So it is a practice amongst modern men today to allow women to determine what cultural practices you are going to participate in as a family, so long as you are given enough time to do what it is that you want. There are some things that in my family we don't do. And it's not that my wife at some point didn't want to do them. My wife is from Brazil. She moved here sometime before we met, became married. I'll use Disney as an example. Very natural and normal for her to want to go to Disney, because being raised in Brazil, having Disney World here, that's something that, like, yeah, all right, makes sense. I explained she can go to Disney World, but my kids aren't going. This is years before all the pedophile stuff, all of the, the anti, don't say gay, like all the other stuff that's going on nowadays. This is years before that, because the basic premise of a corporation telling me that I have to participate in using their business in order to be a good parent, I rejected. And I sat down at multiple points of my young adult life, parent life on top of it, and asked myself, well, what is it that I'm supposed to do according to corporations, and what is it I'm supposed to do according to what I understand good parenting to be? You have Danny. What's up, brother, man? He says, I think it has a lot to do with keeping up with the Joneses. And I would say the bulk of it is that. The majority, if not all of it, is that, or at least the introduction to the pressure is that. But then what winds up happening is one becomes of the Joneses, and then what is of the Joneses starts to determine your system of value, right? Like, think about it. All you guys watching right now, how many people do we know? Because I'm going to exempt all of you, because clearly you guys are fucking on the ball, right? You are not, suffering from these deficiencies. But how many people do we know want a level of attention on social media that they're willing to put their wives' business or their husband's business or their children's business, parade their children in front of strangers online as a way of feeling better about themselves? You have a lot of people in today's society that are making a lot of money, but are unhealthy, are unhappy, that live in big houses, but are lonely and disconnected. They travel all around the world and don't mean one person worth of fucking any of the countries they visit. And don't become one iota better as a man or a woman as a result of it. And so many things they sort of pride themselves on is a result of the reaction they get to the people around them in their lives. They need other people, disconnected people, not tribally bound people, these other people to approve of who they are. And I think that that a lot of people, because speaking on leveraging some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier, a lot of people, they haven't been raised relying on approval of people that matter. They haven't really suffered the consequences of not abiding by the morality or even cultural practices of our parents. Urban environments, like, yeah, you don't have to fucking listen to anything your parents say. You will have schools that will fight your parents for you if you want. I remember having a conversation years ago with a school teacher, and he's talking about a kid that was getting that got spanked by his father, and he was sharing his contempt, and I think realizing that he's talking to me, and like it's like, oh well, I don't know if MC is even on board with this. So he was like, he's like, so do you think parents should spank their children? Well, I'm like, well, spanking a child could be very traumatic to the child. And he said, I know. I said, but what if he needs to be spanked? And he was like, well, a child never needs to be spanked. I said, well, I disagree. And of course, and this is very typical, he said, well, what are the times where a child should be spanked? I said, well, rather than itemize that, we could be very specific to individual families and individual children. Let's speak more generally. Were you spanked as a child? And he said, yeah. I said, do you consider yourself to be a functional member of society, despite the fact that you suffered that injustice? He's like, well, it was, I don't think it should have happened. I don't think. I said, well, we can go back and say our parents should have done a whole litany of things. Yet, who are we to say that the removal of those things would have completely undermined our development of who we are today? It's like I could ask him, how do you know that getting spanked didn't make sure that you had a respect for authority or a respect for hard work or compliance to whatever you agree to, being a man of your word, etc. Like, who's to say that didn't contribute to that? And I think a lot of times when, again, in these urban environments, as a representation of the super potent degeneracy of the aquarium, they don't have the feedback that presents itself in a way, in a timely way, that they could actually make associations, these causal associations of, when I do this, this happens. When I do this happens. There is a huge wedge put between those two things, and a lot of that is that wedge is made up of, the government and its surplus bribing people to basically quit on their families and quit on themselves in terms of identity. Just be who we say you are. We'll give you all this stuff. By the way, everybody wants this stuff. Don't you want this stuff? And it's easy to see, when you're outside of it, how somebody could just volunteer for victimization when it comes to their identity, when it comes to eventually their tribe's morality. It's like, how do you guys expect to keep doing or keep making sure that the right thing is the functional thing if you're allowing a government entity, along with strangers via social media, to tell you whether things are good or bad? These people don't have any vested interest in your survival, in you thriving. A lot of times, quite the opposite. The government at this point, I think it doesn't take a conspiracy theorist for the average person to just be able to connect with on some intellectual level that, yeah, It'd be a lot more convenient for the government if we just, became consumer minded. If we just bought what they said to buy and just did the jobs that they wanted us to do. And like, it kind of makes sense that we would be less of a pain in the ass for the corporate moguls, for the billionaires behind the scenes, bankrolling all of these, lifetime politicians, campaigns, and such. Like, it's not too far fetched an idea like it once was. Guys, I think with my mindset have been able to realize this, for a hell of a lot longer than I've been around. But at this point, 47, been around the block, father, business owner, husband, brother, son, friend to many men, have traveled. Like, I have some experiences that tells me that, you know what, we're getting it wrong. We're getting it wrong collectively. Right. So it comes down to, well, what does getting it right mean? What does getting it right look like? I'm of the city. What is it that we're supposed to do? Well, I will tell you right now in my coaching, right, the pressure process. What I do, my mission as a coach, is to help men who exist in the modern aquarium to develop a code that transcends the feedback of the aquarium. To have men design a code, right, a transcendent set of values that connects them to the type of power and the type of anti-fragility, we could say, that a man's code used to be made for. It's like we used to have codes that reflected what it meant to survive. But now in this artificial environment, surviving, you could do that a lot of ways, so long as you're in the aquarium. Right? You can't take one of these weak little, these, what are they, ambisexual? What are they, like, I'm not a man, I'm a woman, I'm everything, nothing, whatever the fuck they call themselves. You can't take one of them and put them to survive in the middle of the woods. Or take 100 of them and train them up to fight some sort of battle with violence. Like, there's such a limitation on what they're going to be able to do, just practically in a natural setting, because of all of these expectations they have of what the landscape's supposed to look like at default. I remember when, and I've said this before, when I moved up here to, to the Poconos, it's like in the city, it gets dark. But when you're in the woods in the middle of the night, I thought that was like dark. And then after a while, it's like, no, this is dark. Right? So that means in the city, I had like dark light. Like Diet Pepsi, right? I have Diet Dark in the city. But understanding that, coming to that, this is the way it's supposed to be, that is different. When your whole life you're raised with the opposite perspective. Like, what is that we're supposed to do? We're supposed to anchor ourselves to those natural qualities, those natural values. Gays. You want to be gay? Be a fucking gay. I don't give a shit. But as soon as you say that tribally, we have to normalize the morality you have as a result of being a homo, well, no, that's just not going to work. Why? Because it is a rejection of the formulas that got us to where we are right now. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people, and I use the gay movement as an example, there are a lot of people who don't want society to be the way it is. They want to customize this to where they could feel normal. But that's what happens with weak people. Weak people, they're constantly trying to calm the sea. There's never a thought that, maybe I should strengthen my boat. Maybe I should fix and strengthen and reinforce my boat. No, it's the sea. The sea needs to calm down. Weak people will always have that approach. But now here's the thing where strong people fuck themselves up. Because we could take it, we think that it's okay. So you'll have these, I'll bring up the gender reveal, right? The men who are going along with this gender reveal, like, stop that bullshit, please. Stop that narcissistic, stranger-driven fucking nonsense. Nobody gives a fuck what you're having, by the way. Nobody gives a fuck. And if anybody in your life actually does give a fuck, whether or not you're having a son or a daughter, fucking call them. Send them a card. What is this fucking celebration to find out that your child's going to be a boy or a girl? Didn't we used to celebrate for shit that actually fucking like represented some great opportunity or accomplishment? Okay, you got your wife pregnant. She's having a baby. Gender reveal. I already know the gender. It's going to be a boy or a girl. And if it's a boy, you should be happy. If it's a girl, you should be happy. Graduating 8th grade. My daughter's, we're having a party for my daughter. She's graduating. Isn't your daughter like 12? Is she a genius? Well, no, it's from 8th grade. You graduate 8th grade? Well, yeah, the kids now, they graduate 8th grade before going to high school. Oh, well, that's not what we usually, said graduation was. Why would we throw them a party for doing something that's kind of expected and really represents maybe the midpoint, maybe a little further along the path of finishing school? Why don't you think it's a little counter, productive to? Well, no, I think that. Well, my whole thing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And I've been saying that in a lot of different applications. When it comes to even schooling, I'd probably go a little bit more old school than pre 8th grade graduations. Obviously, I'm a homeschool advocate, but when we get to the point where we're looking at reality and all of its challenges, and then we look at, okay, how did these formulas serve well? The last 2-3 years, the adventure that the world was on, it's going to be the greatest fucking hoax in the history of mankind, is my opinion, when all's said and done. The amount of just complete fraudulent representation of reality was at a level that we've never seen. My family, and again, I live, in a house. I have a couple of acres of land, so there are some things that, make my situation more unique and not universal. But I will say, by and large, the last 2-3 years, my kids' lives were just about unaffected. Like the pandemic and all these things that were going on to them was something that we spoke about when it was relevant dealing with people outside of our lives. But everybody's still trained, everybody still read, everybody still did their work, everybody had their chores, everybody still interacted. Like there was still this universal adherence, in terms of our rituals that protected us from a lot of the vulnerabilities that a lot of people, couldn't find their way out of, over the last 3 years. And it's just an approach. Like right now, you'll have people that, because they think there's slack in the noose, that they're never going to hang. You got to get your head out of the fucking noose to begin with. And it starts with your mindset. It starts with the code that you are following as an individual. And then it starts to scale from there into what type of functional, morality do you have in your home? What type of rituals that enforce a morality do you share with your tribe? Do you even have a tribe? What are you standing for? How many concessions are you making from day to day? Like I got to be honest. And I had a talk with one of my sons the other day, and this was good because he was confused, and I had to keep it real. I'm very authentic when having conversations with my children. There's some topics they're not able to reference effectively, so there's some things we won't discuss. But I won't make some shit up. I'll say no. When you're a little older, we'll discuss that. But he had asked me. He said, "Daddy, how come we don't have Netflix?" And I said, because they put on a pedophile movie a couple of years ago, and I just made a decision that I don't want to support them, and we're okay if I don't support them, so I just canceled Netflix. So then he said, "Well, are you going to cancel Disney Plus because of all of the propaganda and everything going on?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I don't know. Should I? Do you think I should?" And he said, "Well, I like watching things that are on Disney Plus, but I would understand if you did." Which, very mature of him. He's 10 years old, right? My 7-year-old daughter probably would disagree. But the thing is, I had to explain to him, we can't lie about where we are, even on an individual position. Like, I'm connected to the aquarium. I do not have livestock. I'm not growing crops that I'm living off of. Like, I'm talking through the internet, some technological magic that I don't fucking understand 99% of it, but I'm leveraging this to connect with people. A lot of you I've never met in the real world. Like, so I don't want to be hypocritical here. Like, the whole idea of it is, how do we retain our ability to be resilient when the bubble of this aquarium pops? Even though, by and large, we're all operating in it. It's like, yeah, you need to stop with the fucking, this corporation has installed rites of passage in my family that we're going to abide by. You need to stop trying to leverage yourself and your families for the approval of strangers. Stop trivializing the unique and special nature of your children into, posts on social media. Like, oh, let him do this. I'm gonna take a video of him doing this. A lot of people will like this online, incentivizing that as being the direction that he should look to grow toward. It's like, unfuck that stuff. I did an email series maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. It's all a blur, on why you shouldn't be on social media. And I still stand by that. I said the only conditions that I would approve of being on social media, whatever that means, is if you're making money on social media, or if you're part of private groups where you connect to family in a functional way, or people that you actually deal with in the real world. And I stand by that. Now, I'm somebody that has a whole bunch of stuff that I sell online. I have a lot of products online. So I don't want to be hypocritical. I'm sure there's going to be some hypocrisy there, and I'm certain a lot of my critics will be, all too motivated to bring them up to me. But when it comes down to it, it's like, I've said this before. I've said this online. I've said this in private. Like, if I became independently wealthy, I don't know if anybody'd ever see me again. Like, I don't need the approval of people to feel better about myself. Quite the opposite. I am a copywriter. I am a marketer. I understand persuasion. I understand persuasion in print. I understand persuasion in selling. I've sold from the stage before. Like, I understand a lot of those dynamics, and I'm trained and I'm skilled in a lot of those capabilities. However, when you look at the amount of work that I put into developing a lot of my social media stuff, it's like, it leaves something to be desired. And a lot of it is because it's like, yeah, I have a couple of different businesses, everything's going fine, bills are paid. Like I want to do something that is worth the shit. And I'm constantly, admittedly, constantly walking that line of, I have to do more because I can't take any of the productivity that my businesses have for granted. So I have to be productive. And I do have online businesses, but by the same token, I don't ever want my morality to reflect, my sense of self-worth, being a product of other people's approval. And I think when people take inventory of exactly what's going on in their lives, they'll find that there are things that they're doing right now that they feel bad if it doesn't go well, but ultimately those things don't even fucking matter. And you have to be able to identify that and start getting off the teat. I guarantee any one of you, although you should still go to Master Chim and sign up for my emails, if every single one of you eliminated their social media or their social media presence, that's a good half step. A step in the right direction. Don't participate. Get a pseudonym and just connect to, maybe content creators or communities that resonate with you in the real world. Like, that would be a step in the right direction. But to get to the point where you're arguing with strangers, tell me that, like, that 5 minutes you spend going back and forth with a stranger about something that's probably irrelevant. It's most certainly irrelevant. You're telling me that that stranger deserved you for those 5 minutes more than your wife, more than your son, more than your daughter, more than your hobby, more than your rituals that make you stronger? Like that stranger deserved those 5 minutes more than all those alternatives? We know that that's not the case. So why do we do it? It's because that's the only way we know how to be. Because number one, we've never questioned its validity because this is what everybody does. I remember when, I've been talking about this a lot recently, and it really wasn't as significant as I'm probably leveraging it to be. But when I went to Discovery Studios, because a listener of the podcast contacted me about me and White Boy Pat, potentially having a show on Discovery. Like, I remember being there, and there was such a lack of excitement when it came to the potential scale that this little thing that I created in my office in the Bronx could be on a TV show. Again, not to say that it was mine to fucking take, but just the idea of it, which certainly I'm sure lent itself to it not working. Like, I didn't fucking care. I did not care because I think I've been around the block enough to know, like, you motherfuckers don't love me. You don't want to support me. You don't care about my kids. You don't care. Like, don't fucking act like we're a level of alliance that we're clearly not. And I think, with a lot of people nowadays, their sense of self-worth is controlled mostly by other people. And it's a very fragile way to be. And when you're fragile, yeah, whether consciously or subconsciously, you're going to avoid conflict. You're going to avoid struggle. And it just so happens conflict and struggle are at the root of every process that makes you worth the shit to begin with. So if you're going to be fragile forever, you're going to be weak forever. All right, let me get some comments here. I'm getting fired up. All right. Okay, Rockstar, this book that he wrote. Rockstar is one of my best friends and longtime students. Fuck fighting. All right, clearly it's not a family show. Fuck fighting, even though this dude taught me to be able to slap the shit out of the average person, regardless of their size or strength. I say this to say, fuck what he's taught me about fighting. This dude has taught me to use my fucking head and think critically and not be a fucking loser. You can tell by how he communicates and forwards his mindset. Okay, enough of this praise. Well, I'm still grateful for the reluctant praise, Rockstar. Jack Gerber, what's going on, brother, man? All right. Moonbear, what's up? Moonbear says the larger social media tribe is highly dysfunctional. Right. And I would actually put the quotations around tribe there, right? Because that's really the representational, use of the term. It's not a tribe. It's not a tribe. I remember a couple of years ago, one of my coaching students, he might even be watching, told me that he had a friend. It was his supervisor. And I said, I asked him, I said, oh, he's your friend. He's like, yeah, because I was asking him if he had any friends in his, he had just relocated with his then girlfriend. And he said, yeah, my supervisor, so-and-so, is a really cool dude. We get along. And I asked him, I said, has he ever been to your house? And he said, no. I said, been to his house? No. Does he have children? Yeah. You ever met his kids? No. You know their names? No. He's not your fucking friend. He's not your friend. Right. So I think when we look at the connections we make with people, because, and I think to all of us, we're honest with ourselves, we need connection. Right. And connection sometimes gets conflated with company. It's like, yeah, I have a lot of friends. Well, no, you're around a lot of people. Like even allies. That is a much more general term. Even friend has a connotation that makes it a subset of your allies. Tribe is a smaller subset still, right? So when we look at these different scales, I think it's going to benefit us to set our expectations appropriately according to the function of what these scales represent. If you were to go to your neighbor and say, hey, you know, can I use your bathroom real quick? You know, my bathroom's broken. I got to go, like whatever. Your neighbor might be like, all right, you know, just go in. But if you went to somebody you didn't know, hey, same thing. Hey, how you doing? My bathroom broke. You mind if I, no, I'm good, man. Like, good luck with that. Like, get the fuck out. Might not even open a door depending on where you live. There's levels to this shit. No pun intended. All right. Aaron, what's up, Aaron? Hey, MC, quick question. I bought your homeschooling book a few years ago. Man, you were one of the lucky ones. Before I even got pregnant in the first place. I'm not going to take credit for making women, more susceptible to the power of pregnancy through the purchase of my products. And now that our daughter is turning 3 in December, holy shit, time flies. It's probably time to actually read it now. Okay, well, there you go. So it's just the possession. It's not necessarily the reading of the book. So my question is, since you've written the book, has anything you've written changed in any way or that you'd update? I hope that makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. And I would say yes and no. What do I mean? My position on homeschooling has certainly evolved, but I will say that book was not written to share my philosophy on homeschool as it was. So the book itself was meant to be and it's not even for sale. So it's called Finding a Way to Homeschool, but it was meant to be basically an introduction to this world of homeschooling and the history of how schooling became government schooling without any real approach to telling parents what they should or shouldn't do in the process itself. And if you think about it, and I wrote this book so long ago, I would really just be theorizing or just pulling ideas out of my ass because I hadn't gone through any of that experience. So it was much more of an ideological share and a lot of the reference material to sort of populate that position than it was this is what you should do, So definitely read the book. Moonbear says follow the code. Absolutely. Joe says trophies for everyone all the time. That's right. If just participating is worth a reward, you start to imply that it is extra. Like if I don't participate, I just don't get a reward. Well, the reward is in the participation. But if we take that participation and we reduce it to a trinket, then they don't fall in love with the process. They don't see the value in the process, or even worse still, they don't even feel obligated to do the process. It's like, you got to pay me. It's like, hey, you need to take a shower. What am I going to get for taking a shower? That becomes the application of that type of mindset. Jay Cross said, thanks, Steve, for the great discussion. To all the viewers, have a nice Thanksgiving. Absolutely. You are welcome, and a happy Thanksgiving to you. Derek says, weak versus strong. The strong can always take and endure challenges better than the weak. How do we, as a strong group, prevent our mentality of enduring from being taken advantage of by the weak? I touched on it a little bit, and I think a lot of it has to do with, if you plug here, if you read my book, or if you go to the Power Program, the Alliance Trivium, I talk about the Transcendent Alliance. And the Transcendent Alliance are these basically loyalties we have, as if, as the same type of loyalties that we would have to an ally. But the loyalty in this instance is put to a representation of a value in the form of, traditionally a god, a religion, the religious relationship that people have with the transcendent would fit this bill. But it could also be a code. It could also be, well, this is what I live by. These are my rules. Now, the reason why these transcendent values are so valuable and also practical for an individual is they're out of the reach of the ebbs and flows of one state. Good mood, bad mood, temptation, discipline, like all of these dynamics that we're constantly battling with, which is the human condition, the human experience, which is, something that we should be grateful for. But part of that is sometimes we need the compass. It's, if we say, I'll use an example, just popped in my head. I used to teach arm bars, right? When I taught arm bars, I would teach it so that the thumb of our opponent's arm was up, right? Thumb up. And 90% of the time, when you're doing an armbar, grabbing the orientation of his hand so that his thumb is up, is going to serve you well doing an armbar. But then I realized the language was limited and it was a little sloppy. It was a little, undeveloped. And how I evolved it is to say, grab it so that the thumb is away, right? So when we say, grab the hand so that the thumb is away from your chest, it accommodates all those situations where you're not doing an armbar flat on your back, because up implies towards the ceiling. Well, if you're doing an armbar at an angle where locking up the opponent's arm, would be taken apart, by putting your thumb towards the ceiling, well, now we're doing them a disservice, right? So I had to evolve the language. So the thing is, these transcendent values that we have help orient us in situations where we don't want to just take our individual state, the mood that we're in, or even the landscape of what's going on in this snapshot in time. We want to have something that's telling us how to be, and not what to be, who to be, but how to be, that is out of the reach of all of the dirtiness of those malleable components of our lives, right? Hope that makes sense. A little wordy. Moonbear says, I would argue most societal woes are due to men giving up their dominance hierarchy. And I agree with you. Obviously the language is a little loaded and charged, and people are going to want to reject it just because of the language itself. But I think the dynamic, that covers and addresses is exactly right. I think that, part of society benefiting so significantly from a patriarchal framework, it's because it allows men to be the expendable ones that are going out and getting their hands dirty, interacting with strangers, in trade and commerce and whatnot. I don't think it undermines or undervalues the significance and the role that a woman plays at all, because, like, to me, it's very, it's difficult for people to tell me, and they have plenty of times, maybe after this conversation, that I'm sexist or, I don't respect women. And, like, the most important things in my life are my wife and my children. So though my wife's job, her role and her job of taking care of my children, she is literally in charge of the things that are the most important to me on the planet. So how somebody could say that is belittling her significance is illogical, it's inaccurate, and it's just a selfish statement for somebody to make, those people that would make that. But I would say absolutely, when you look at how so many aspects of our society have, gone sideways, it's because we were looking to nurture people instead of manage people. And I think by and large, that is a very feminine approach towards life. And it's permeated into areas that suffer, because of its presence. I think that, when you look at these companies where everybody is supposed to be, treated with kid gloves and accommodated with every, whim that they express, any discomfort supposed to be quelled by the company. Everybody's supposed to be babied and coddled. Like you'll see with what was it, Twitter, with Elon Musk. I don't know what percentage of the company he got rid of, but Twitter didn't miss a beat, and when we start saying that people need to be made to feel good, that is a very nurturing aspect to have. So that perspective is very feminine. It's very motherly. And as a society, we need that in certain areas of our life. But when dealing with people who are outside our tribal wall in a way where we negotiate without losing the stability of and the strength of our identities, like that is a very masculine energy required to do that. Because good business, I've said this before, good business is win-win. It means I don't take advantage of you, but it also means you don't fucking take advantage of me. And that latter observation or component of good business, as an example, is something that men are designed to regulate. Like, why would we have a woman firefighter? Like, why would we do that? Because there's some narrative that is addressing everything, but how do we put the best person for the fucking job there? Firefighting, it's an area where people will literally lose their lives because of a political ideology. And it's just a conversation I don't have. It's silly. And I suffer the consequences, or at least I'm exposed to the consequences. I don't know how much suffering I do, but it's like, yeah, I get people that don't like what I say because I refuse to play that game. And I can be very heavy-handed with my message. I get it. I have something in me, and I don't know if it was just how I am or how I evolved, the combination of the two. But there are things that I am going to say, and if I don't say them, I can't fucking sleep at night because I feel like I feel cowardly because I avoided putting something out there that I know was the right thing to say. And I've had to learn to be responsible for that voice or that aspect of my personality as I've gotten older, because sometimes my position would be wrong. But the thing is, even in those cases, I was open after I expressed it to the process or conversation that would allow me to realize I was wrong. Not when I was about 10. My mother will attest to that. Strong and wrong. That was the phrase that I heard a lot of when I was a kid. But there was a point where it's like, okay, this is wrong. I'm going to say it's wrong. And if it's not wrong, I want everybody right now to explain to me why it isn't wrong. And there's too many people that are just willing to turn a blind eye. I still see people wearing masks. I brought my dog to get groomed this morning. And I'm in a pet store. And there's a guy there with a mask on. And I'm sitting there. I'm literally fucking arguing with myself to shut the fuck up. Like, Justin, shut the fuck up. My dog's like halfway through his appointment. Like, don't. By the way, I went to a pet store that's like 45 minutes away, because the one 25 minutes away, I didn't get thrown out, but I left under protest a year and a half ago over some mask thing, ironically. So I have to drive already an extra 25 minutes to this other one. And here I am. And there's something, but they're not affecting me. They're not doing this, but there's still something in our society where we can't just accept that these people are destroying the fabric of how we deal with one another under the guise of their freedom as an American, their right to be with. They absolutely have those rights. But along with that is our right to criticize it. And that's the part that nobody wants to fucking maintain in society. It's like, yeah, you could do whatever you want. You want to dress like a woman, with a beard, and go and you want to, gallivant up and down the fucking street talking about, how unique and special you are. That's fine. You could do that. I'm going to mock you while you're doing it. As soon as you tell me that I'm not going to mock you, because mocking you is wrong, I'm going to say, well, it's funny how you don't criticize what you're doing. And that's how it always is. I think that everybody should be able to play, by the rules in that case. I'm not saying, there should be some sort of law where that person can't do that, because that's a whole nother, choice entirely. But in order to preserve the morality of a culture, we need to be able to mock people who are being incompatible so that they understand they're incompatible and they suffer the social consequences of incompatibility. Philip says, what's up, Phil? He says, I think it also has to do with men not wanting to be involved in a divorced boy's life. Hope that makes sense. Well, it's a situation that, there's not a lot of bright sides to it. When a man and a woman have a child, boy specifically, as per, your example, and the mother takes the takes the man out of the boy's life. It's a testament to what society encourages and incentivizes. I think certainly there's a gray area of nuance where some people who are in the machinations of the government still understand and try to do the right thing in a fucked up situation in terms of visitation and even the money ugliness that comes as a result of that. I think, though, that it's a testament to our society. I'm married right now. My wife and I happily married. We have 4 kids. If, hypothetically, 2 years from now, we were to get divorced and have one of those ugly fucking, Lifetime movie divorces, crazy and all this shit. It's like there is no right way to manage my child's upbringing at that point. Everything is a fraction of what it is right now as soon as that happens. So you're already starting, where the maximum is limited, in those types of situations. And I think that, again, when looking at the scale of influence, I used the analogy earlier of, when we dig a ditch, there's only a certain point where we could still jump out of it. Then past a certain point, we got to climb out of it, and I think where things like that are concerned, men dealing with their children when they are not with the mothers, it's like, as a society, this is a ditch that has been dug for decades, and it's going to take a path to climb out of it, which means it's going to take time. And there are going to be a lot of people that suffer, in the interim, usually children that are going to suffer in the interim, because it's not only the system is designed to punish fathers for wanting to participate in their child's life or to be a productive father to their children. There are also fathers who now don't feel an obligation to connect with their children. And I'll be honest, there have been people who I have advised in the past, like, listen, you're going to lose your shit if you keep trying to get custody of your child. You need to stay functional. And then, and it's almost tragic that it gets to the point where, for me, I've dealt with people where it's like, listen, I almost have to tell them to forget their child because they're borderline dysfunctional as an individual. So it's like when you have a dad that blows his brains out because he can't see his kid, which happens. I'm going to be the guy that, prior to that happening, if I have access to this guy and I know what's going on, I'm going to tell him, listen, you will connect with your child later on in life. But right now you have to strengthen that identity to the point where you are resilient enough to walk the path towards getting back in your son's life. Like, it's fucked up any way you look at it. But again, I'm always going to be an advocate for what is pragmatic, what is practical, what is logical. How do we not just quit? Right? Because that's the other side of it. We get so overwhelmed because we're using these tools that just either aren't fixing the issue or aren't fixing them quick enough. And we wind up just saying, fuck it. We throw in a towel. Happens all the time on a daily basis. Right? So we know we have to avoid that as being the end result of it. Jamie says, the patriarchy saved far more women from the consequences of accusations of witchcraft than it ever condemned. And I would go, I agree, and I would go at a lot larger scale than that. Western patriarchy has produced the most protected women in the history of mankind. So it's really, it's like hearing, like when you hear like spoiled kids have a position on something, relevant or significant. And it's like, what the fuck do you know? Like, what the fuck are you complaining about? It's like right now we have one of the many degenerate aspects of our society. You have wealthy or affluent, white women having opinions on how brown and black people are supposed to live and how we're supposed to treat them. Like they don't even realize the arrogance, the disrespect involved, and then even sharing some perspective on how these people are supposed to be handled or managed, what opportunities are supposed to be given to them because they can't, handle it themselves. I think I'm about to sneeze. Oh, excuse me. So I think right now when you're looking at Western society, and I've said this before, we're suffering from the surplus. We have such a surplus of resources, we forgot the value of being functional and maintaining the virtues that got us to the point where we had enough resources. Like we've thrown these formulas out, So I think right now, it's important that, plenty of people I know that live in the city still, and they're not going to move out of the city right now, if ever. And I'm not saying that, in order to live the right way, you need to get out of the city. It certainly would help, but I'm also, realistic. I myself, I still have a business in the city, so I could say all I want. Hey, I moved out of the city. I'm living in the mountains. Like, well, I still have to drive to the city regularly. I still have to deal with the city regularly. During COVID, like, I never closed my school, but it was a pretty bumpy road, over the last 2 years, 3 years. I had to downsize my business. Like, we had to come out of the other end of it, and I'll be honest, like, the city was not looking to do me any favors. Not that I can't even say that it was any different anywhere else, but my experience with the city, it's like it wasn't doing anybody any favors. I remember one of my people, one of my students leaving, and when he left, is because of my support for Donald Trump, and he couldn't get over. He said that uh, do you still support Donald Trump after everything that we've discovered about him? And like, I know this guy is just a little bit of a untethered liberal leaning mind. But it's one of those great things about the mats. A lot of times you're on the mat with somebody, you're training. Like, a lot of those things don't fuck up, us from discovering the overlap. But I know this guy's tendencies, where those things are concerned. So I asked him, I said, support him how? Like, send him money? Well, you think, and it's like he showed up ready to have an argument, but already had my role and my script played out. And my whole thing was like, I don't give a fuck about Donald Trump. But that's not what voting for him even meant. And it's this reductionist oversimplification of looking at life that makes so many of these people suffer these consequences of these dysfunctional formulas. It's because they think everything's simplistic. They don't think there's a gray area. They refuse to look at alliances through the lens of different scales. I've known this guy over 10 years at the time, right? And I've been there for him. He's been there for me. Like, we were pretty functional as allies for over a decade. And he wound up leaving the school because I said that I supported Donald Trump in any way. It's like, what the fuck does that matter for us? Like, to sever alliances because of something that somebody's convinced you is significant to our alliance. Like it only the untethered identity can subject himself to that type of ridiculousness. When you're anchored to what matters, it doesn't matter how rough the storm is. You know where you are. You know where you stand. I was watching a TV show the other day, and it was I think it was Criminal Minds, right? I love that show, Criminal Minds. I always watched old TV shows. I've spoken about that before. And there was an episode where it was like a father, and he had his 2 children with him. I'm fucking it up somehow, but I'll get the gist of it. Was captured by a serial killer. And the father was basically told, if you don't shoot one of your kids, I'm going to kill both of them. And my kids were there, good family entertainment, watching this serial killer show. And I, one of them asked, what would you do? Of course, it's like, oh, no pressure there, son. And I said, we would all die because I'm just not doing it. And the rebuttal to that, not that my kids provided one, but anticipating what a rebuttal to that would be, but yeah, if you just kill one, no, at least the other one's still alive. And it's like, listen, never mind that you're presupposing that the guy is actually going to follow through with the promise that he made, right? But you would kill your child to save the other one. Is the other one going to live forever? What type of life does that look like? Being the one sibling that who survived after the father killed the other one. What's your relationship with that sibling going to be like? There's just so much dysfunction because people reduce things to this. Well, this just makes sense to this. Well, hold up a second. Either kill one of your kids or I'm going to kill them all. Then we all die. Fuck you. That's my response. Now, it's easy to say it. Yeah, but MC, you've never been in that situation. Well, what the fuck would you want me to say right now? I can't say that I've been in that situation, but of course, but my philosophy, my mindset, my logic, my understanding of all the parameters of what's happening in this hypothetical, it's like, yeah, I'm going to tell the guy to go fuck himself. And if he kills all my kids and lets me live, well, I didn't kill them. He did. I'm going to try my hardest to do what I can to fucking, be the hero and all that. That's what people say to make themselves feel better about it. But there's just a certain point where I'm somebody who was like, okay, like, I'm not going to allow somebody to tell me who I am and what I believe in and who I'm supposed to be. Especially not when they threaten me with, pain or suffering or survival. It's like, all right, all you guys that are killing your kids in that situation, I hope you and your child live forever. And the thing is, you can't even have an opinion on this if you don't have a system of morality that you are anchored to as an individual. And that's what, bringing this whole talk full circle, that's what the urban vermin don't have. They are creatures that grow out of a decrepit, degenerate aquarium that have never been introduced to natural moral consequence. And we are making a mistake if we ever expect them to develop it organically. No. So what's the answer? You have to strengthen yourself. You have to strengthen your tribe. You have to connect with and invest in people who reflect the compatibility of your beliefs. But as soon as you think being a good dad is having a gender reveal party or going to Disney World, or getting your kids the latest, greatest sneakers, or having a fancy, fancy car because of how it looks, as soon as you're doing that, you're fucking up. And you're not the one in control of your own identity, let alone your destiny. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Just so you guys know, next couple of days, thewarriorproject.com, $120 for the year. It's usually $497. I only open up registration a couple times a year. So not only is it open right now for the next couple of days, but it's also at a huge discount. You can go there and see everything that's available. I probably should have done more to present that at some point during this talk. But suffice it to say, every power program, the archive of every single podcast episode I've done, a whole bunch of other stuff. You can go to the Warrior Project, check out everything that's there, and it's included. But for the next few days, it's $120. If you do that, also you could send me a message on Facebook, and I will allow you to get into the private Warrior Project group on Facebook also. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for showing up. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.